I just didn't have what it takes. Those words are painful to internalize, and for many of us, even more difficult to admit aloud. Because it's scary going after things that we care so deeply about in our lives, knowing that we may fail, knowing that we may not amount to that vision. So what do we do? Tonight we're going to discuss 3 important aspects about failure that I want you all to take home with you when you leave here tonight. The first is about the pressures that we face to succeed. The second is about accepting failure. And third and finally is about embracing it. My hope is that we all leave here tonight being more open to failure as an inevitable part of the process and the path that we are all on to achieve the goals that we care about, while simultaneously cultivating a community around us that celebrates that very idea. So that brings me to point number 1, the modern day pressures that we face to succeed. The bar for success has really never been higher for humans of today. And as a result, we are quite stressed. I personally find it appalling that despite all of the advancements in medicine and health and technology and all of the luxuries that many of us are fortunate enough to have today, humans of the modern day are more stressed and more anxious than humans of the 1950s. And that's been suggested throughout multiple studies, including one conducted by Dr. Jean Twenge, who's universally known for her studies of generational differences. You might be thinking, well, what's to blame for that stress and that anxiety? Well, a good bit comes from these external pressures that we place on ourselves that can come from family, friends, from work, to achieve goals and attain levels that for so many of us are simply unrealistic and unattainable. On top of that, the 5 billion of us worldwide social media users may argue that we're living in a highlight reel culture in present day. And you know what I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about those YouTubers who are pranking their siblings by filling up their entire houses with slime and just buying a new one to replace it. Or what about those teenage video gamers that are playing the game all day but are making more than double in a single month than what I could make in an entire year? But what about even the more mundane people that we know in our lives who tend to be living in a way in which we wish we could emulate more, who are constantly traveling or getting that job promotion or spending time with friends and family? The list goes on. It's human nature to see this amount of content, and for many of us on a daily basis seeing this content, and to feel down on ourselves for seemingly not matching up to those levels. Because what we've done here, folks, is we've gotten into a cycle of this constant consumption, and for many of us, portrayal of a constant image of success in both the physical and the digital aspects of our lives, taking this scary concept that we call failure and casting it right out of the picture. I argue that needs to change. So that brings me to point number 2, accepting failure, right? First of all, we need to accept that failure does still exist despite what we're told and what we see. And we need to do a better job of accepting it when it happens to us. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not at all up here encouraging you all to just take failure for what it is and move on with life and live life that way. Nor am I encouraging you all to show up to school or work or wherever on Monday and say, boss, Chase told me we need to accept failure. I'm going to do a bad job from here on out, and that's that. Absolutely not. Rather, what I'm saying is that we can reframe failure as a tool that we can leverage as opposed to this weapon that's pitted against us throughout our whole lives. And I want you, for instance, take a student, right, who for many of their academic years was horribly afraid of making mistakes on assignments and exams and horribly afraid of not doing well on exams. And as a result, they did what many of us do, memorize and regurgitate on repeat from K through 12 and for some of us college. Yet the research from expert psychologist Carol Dweck, for instance, is quite clear. And it suggests that people who become more open-minded to failure and more willing to take on the inevitable challenges that come with tasks and actions that aren't innately easy tend to find longer-term success and greater overall outcomes. It would be great if that same student could be back in the classroom with that very mindset. However, he is up here in this red circle giving you all a TEDx talk about failure, the one thing that for so long he wanted to avoid at all costs, yet wouldn't have been possible without it to be up here. And it wouldn't have been possible to get to this point in the process without it. Because trust me, folks, you did not want to hear the first version of this talk. I would feel bad if any of you had to hear it. So what we've done here is, one, we've seen just how much we've casted failure over to the side where it's dark and no one can see it. And then by accepting it or reframing it, we've brought it back into the picture. That's great. But I'm going to challenge this room to take it a step further, okay? And what I mean by that is embracing failure at the community level with each other. It's not enough to accept it as individuals, as I've mentioned. And I'll tell you what I mean by a quick story. I take reference from a show that I really like watching. It's called Modern Family, if you've ever heard of it. And in one of the episodes that I recently watched, one of the main characters, Phil Dunphy, uttered one of my now favorite quotes of all time. And it's very simple. Here's how it goes. In this house, we fail. It's as simple as that. Is my time up? In this house, we fail. See, Phil was speaking with a renowned young professor who had all the accolades that you can imagine in his field of study, who was over at his house for a meal. And during the meal, learned that a scientific theory of his that he spent so much of his life working on was disproven. I watched the professor, distraught, writhing somewhat comically in despair on the couch, yearning for a time in which he wasn't crumbling underneath the pressures to achieve this level of perfection that he was expected to throughout his life. But for me, Phil's words made the rest of it not matter one single bit. Because what I saw when I watched that episode at midnight a few weeks ago and I was about to fall asleep, which became like core to this talk, was a very unfamiliar level of support and assurance that someone in the professor's community provided him in the midst of the failure. Phil made it okay, and he reminded him that with success comes failure, and with failure comes success. It's possible to have both. It's probably impossible to not have both throughout life. So, before we go home tonight, we've casted failure aside as a society, and then we came to this TEDx talk, and Chase told you about how to bring it back in by reframing it. And then we even went a step further and took a very unlikely source of inspiration to embrace it in our communities. So now, I know what you're all thinking. Chase, you've absolutely knocked my socks off with your speech about failure, right? Thank you. I appreciate it. But what does that mean for me? How can I actually go about this in the real world? How do I apply this? Let's turn the theory into practice. Well, we're going to start small, even tonight. On your drive home, whether that's like home, a hotel, wherever, we're going to lay off those car horns as much as humanly possible, especially when we're trying to get out of the parking lots and get through Main Street. I know that's a debacle. But we're going to lay off those car horns as much as possible, and we're going to be forgiving and understanding of the people around us and assume that they have the best of intentions. Then we're going to get back to the hotel. We're going to get home. We're going to go to bed. We're going to wake up tomorrow. And we're going to reach out to someone that we know who's going after something that they really care about. And we're going to say something very simple. We're going to say, hey, you're crushing it. You're doing a great job, and I'm here for you no matter what happens. And then finally, moving forward overall in all facets of our lives, we're going to make the people that we care about and the people that care about us feel safe and remind them that in this house and in this community, we fail. Thanks, everyone. This is a dream come true. Appreciate it.